In this podcast summary, Maher and Bob Costas cover various topics related to entertainment, sports, and culture. They begin by discussing Milton Berle, a dominant figure in early television who fell from grace later in his career, and Johnny Carson, who retired and never looked back. Moving on to baseball, Maher argues that Keith Hernandez, Dave Parker, and Don Mattingly should be inducted into the Hall of Fame, pointing out that they were better than some who have already been inducted, especially Hernandez, who Maher believes was the greatest defensive first baseman ever. They also discussed the 1986 Mets team, known for their personality and swagger, and why athletes today are more frail compared to those of the past, with Maher pointing out that the size of the contracts and the analytics that dictate the approach of the game today are some of the reasons for this. Maher expresses his disappointment with how over-refereeing has affected sports today, taking away from the meritocracy that sports should represent. He notes that sports is the last place where merit always wins out and where there are no Nepo babies, stating that while children of famous players may have some advantages due to genetics and exposure to the game, they still have to have the talent, discipline, and drive to succeed. They discuss how society has become increasingly full of nonsense, with sports being the last bastion of meritocracy that we can trust. Maher expresses his trust in sports as a place where merit always wins out, which is something he feels is lacking in other areas of society such as government and religion. They also discuss how sports can bring people of different races together, and how racism is much less cool among young people today. Maher notes that locker rooms look more friendly and less racially divided these days, while Costas agrees. They also discuss the idea of meritocracy in sports, where the best players are chosen regardless of their race, arguing that sports is a great place to feel good about race in America. Finally, they talk about how basketball and football are attracting gifted black athletes, while baseball has made efforts to involve inner-city academies to attract more talent from diverse backgrounds. Maher expresses his frustration with some of the rules in football, including the rule that nullifies great catches on the sidelines due to minor movements of the ball. He compares it to a controversial call made during the 1999 LCS and argues that letting players decide the game is a great decision. They also discuss broadcasting and the importance of trying to nail it every time. Bob talks about the writers on his show and how lucky he feels to have such a talented crew. He mentions that some of them have been with him for over 20 years and that they feel like family. The conversation then becomes more personal as Bob shares a story about Bill visiting his house in St. Louis and recognizing how much Bob's children meant to him. He also talks about being offered a job by David Letterman, which led to his career in broadcasting. Maher discusses his decision to turn down an offer from 60 Minutes to spend more time with his children and how he feels about marriage and children in general. He expresses his views on Nepo babies in show business and how talent is ultimately what matters. Costas agrees and notes that most of the top-level actors could be replaced by someone else. The conversation then shifts to the Oscars and the lack of movies with substance and a meaningful message. Maher criticized the Oscars for becoming too niche and focused on politics. Costas adds that the current state of the entertainment industry reflects the larger cultural divide in America. Maher and Costas also discuss cancel culture and how younger people often shut off debate when someone is older or white. Maher finds this statement profoundly stupid and argues that intelligence, familiarity with the world, and being a sentient human being with an observant eye should count for something. The conversation then turns to the controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling and the backlash she received for her comments on trans issues. Maher argues that people need to stop using terms like hate to describe those with differing opinions and points out that being pro-life doesn't mean someone hates women. They agree that people should not be labeled as transphobic or anti-women simply for expressing their opinions, and that it is important to have open, honest discussions about sensitive topics. They discuss the GPT-ChatGPT controversy, in which a robot was programmed to mimic the language patterns of a teenage girl, and the potential consequences of allowing artificial intelligence to generate written content. Maher expresses his technophobia and reluctance to embrace new technology, but also acknowledges the benefits of modern advancements. Maher then discussed the ESPY Awards, where Caitlyn Jenner received the Arthur Ashe Courage Award shortly after her transition. Maher felt that Jenner's sports exploits were from decades ago, making the award seem unwarranted. Costas disagreed and accused Maher of being an idealist. The conversation shifted to sports, with Maher bringing up an article that argued against separating sports by sex. Maher disagreed and argued that it makes sense to separate sports by sex. They also talked about Title IX, a piece of legislation that provided resources for girls' and women's sports in equal measure to men's sports. Costas explained that Title IX created equity in scholastic sports. Maher and Costas acknowledged that women and men don't necessarily want to do the exact same things. They discussed how men are generally stronger and bigger than women, but acknowledged that women have other attributes that men do not have. They also talked about how the U.S. women's soccer team deserves equal resources and pay as the men's team. The conversation ended with Maher and Costas agreeing that women's sports should be celebrated and admired, but that it is important to acknowledge biological differences between men and women when it comes to sports performance. Maher noted that the argument should not be about debating things that shouldn't be debatable to begin with, but rather on how to solve problems related to gender inequality in sports. They start by reminiscing about life before Google and how younger generations might not appreciate the hard work it took to gather information. They also talk about how announcers used to make baseball games interesting by sharing little details and stories. The conversation then shifts to media bias, with Maher and Costas agreeing that some media outlets lack common sense and are biased in their coverage of politics. They discuss Fox News and how it could have been a good thing, but is often too predictable and formulaic in its approach. They also touch upon the declining sophistication of the audience, where people no longer have the attention span to read books and only scroll through social media. Maher and Costas also talk about their experiences in the entertainment industry, including meeting various celebrities and the challenges of predicting where someone will come down on an issue. They both agree that friendships should grow organically over time, rather than being forced or rushed. Maher shares a story about how he once had to register under an assumed name due to death threats, which leads to a discussion about Tony Quebec and how media personalities can become targets of harassment. Overall, the conversation provides a candid and insightful look into the world of media, comedy, and entertainment, as well as the challenges and rewards that come with it.